Hello, my name is Jesse White, and this is my critical assignment presentation of the discussion portion for KIN580. This is my research project seminar. I was part of group one, but due to some real-world situations, I had to remove myself from that group. Moving on. So the purpose of group one study, what we did was we wanted to find, or we wanted to assess the effects of acute caffeine intake on upper body endurance capacity in both male and female populations. And the way that we went about doing this was prescribing a 3 milligram caffeine per 1 kilogram of body weight. And we utilized the American College of Sports Medicine push-up test. And this is pretty much a maximal effort test. So you're going to be doing the push-ups until you can no longer complete 2 successful repetitions. The conclusion of this study was it was insignificant and inconclusive. There wasn't really enough data, and we'll move forward. We'll talk about this later in the presentation, but there wasn't really enough data to have any significant effect statistically. And this is just a quick little clip of our protocol that we followed as far as the caffeine supplementation. So just moving into the data that we were able to collect successfully, we had a total of 5 successful data entries put in from the participants. So if you can see, the blue bar represents the non-caffeinated attempt at the push-up test, and the red bar signifies the caffeinated attempt. So we had an average of 42.4 push-ups repetitions with the non-caffeinated group, and caffeinated averaged out at 48.6. So we did see an increase average of 6.2 repetitions between the 2 tests. So that's something there. Some of the limitations that we ran into with this study, the main one was the number of active participants. So we had a total of 19 possible participants that could have submitted data, and we only had 7 that actually submitted the data. 2 of those submissions had either inaccurate or inadequate levels of caffeine supplementation reported. They were far too low to even be considered for the data collection point. So they were omitted from my table and my charts. So the other thing was data collection delegation. There was a lot left on the participant. Their caffeine supplementation was all directed and prescribed by themselves, so there's room for error there. They were also tasked with performing the push-up test themselves. There was no oversight or proctor present for that. And another big limitation I feel with this one is the number of trials. So there's only 1 run throughout this trial, with the first non-caffeinated attempt at the 1-day mark and another caffeinated attempt at the 5-day mark. I feel that if we had multiple attempts of doing the same iterations over the span of a month, or the span of 2 months, or the span of however long we could do this, we would have a lot more data that we could compile and culminate together and try to come up with some type of conclusion. Another thing that was very big for this study, I believe, was the unknown factor of participants' caffeine dependence and tolerance. You couldn't accurately predict or measure how much caffeine a person is actually taking throughout this study. Caffeine is very prevalent in the world. Everyone is taking it in some sort of fashion for the most part. So their dependence and tolerance and the actual effect that that drug would have on their performance is kind of an unknown factor at this point. So again, the conclusion was that this was a inconclusive or insignificant study to show the effects of caffeine on upper body muscular endurance. So further research is still needed in this area, but I do believe that the results of these studies nevertheless could help support other studies that support the positive effects of caffeine on performance. For example, Duncan et al. 2019, they observed the caffeine's effect on power output using the upper body Wingate test, and they found that there was a significant increase in performance and rate of perceived exertion with the use of caffeine. Another one was Tallis and Yavis 2018, the effects of low to moderate doses of caffeine on performance. So this study was looking at the question of whether or not a low dose supplementation of caffeine has any greater benefit than a high or moderate dose, and vice versa. So whether or not there's any difference between a low dose and a high dose of caffeine, is there a threshold in which there is no perceived benefit to taking more or less? Moving further, I believe we could have benefited from having a larger pool of participants. Obviously, we were shortened by the amount of participants we had in the class and the different groups that were assigned to do our test. But if we had a greater pool of participants that could have participated in our study, that would have helped greatly. Another thing we should have used was we should have met about data recording tools. So video recording, it would have been simple to ask or request that the participants recorded their initial attempt and their caffeinated attempt. That would have just kept some integrity to the test. Not to say that there was no trust in the participants. It's just having that recorded data versus just word of mouth. It's always better for the study. The inclusion of a placebo group. That's another thing I felt that would have helped the reliability and validity of this, because everyone knew that their first attempt was going to have no caffeine, and then everyone knew that their second attempt would be caffeinated. So there's already a lot playing in the psyche right there in terms of, should I put out more during the first attempt or the second attempt? Like, how is that going to look on paper? You kind of have this manifest testing where you think you're going to do more, so you might do less on the first half and do more on the second half. And again, multiple attempts. I believe that if we were to do this study multiple times and have multiple attempts at doing the non-caffeinated and then the caffeinated following the 5-day point, we had multiple attempts and multiple iterations of that iteration, I believe that would have solidified our data points and data pool a little bit more. Altogether, that was my presentation on the discussion portion of this research project. These are the references I used that I mentioned. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thanks.